Well, look, thank you everybody for joining us today. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up, Beth, please. Yep, okay, good, we're on. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. As Beth said, I'm the commercial manager at the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities, and part of my role is to connect up the research outputs and the software tools and the various guidelines and frameworks that the CRC's developed to industry needs. So today's a great opportunity for the CRC to present to each of you a bit of a high-level overview of some of the flagship tools and guidelines that the CRC's developed over its last 9 years. So I will work my way through the slides. There's quite a few slides, so I'm going to move fairly quickly, but fear not, we're recording this today and I'm pretty sure the slide decks will be available also to each of you. So I'll get underway. So just a very quick overview of the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities for those of you that aren't that familiar with the CRC. It's a Commonwealth funded research program commenced in 2012 and will complete in end of June next year. The vision of the CRC is to create water sensitive cities across Australia and globally. And a water sensitive city is a more sustainable, livable, resilient and productive city through smart water management. And our mission within the CRC is to undertake the foundation research to synthesise that research into useful outputs for industry and government and to have impact and influence. And there's been over 80 partners that have been supporting and sponsoring the activities of the CRC over its 9-year tenure. Just very quickly, the first 4 or 5 years of the CRC was focused on 4 key thematic areas of research, looking at society-based research around economics, legal factors, behaviour change and social science, so quite a progression from a more technical research agenda historically. Water sensitive urbanism, looking at factors like urban heat, flood resilience, urban planning, the statutory planning environment and ecology. The future technologies or the blue-green infrastructure as we now know them, water sensitive urban design infrastructure, wastewater management, resource recovery, smart systems and managing decentralised assets. And research into the adoption pathways through built form architecture, urban design, the capacity building and education that's required within industry to be able to implement water sensitive cities futures, case studies and exemplars of what we're talking about, and finally the modelling tools and the analytical tools and the diagnostic tools that enable us to make good decisions in respect of water sensitive cities. So that was the foundation research in the first 4 to 5 years of the CRC. The last 3 to 4 years have really been about integrating the value of that foundation research into useful industry facing outputs. And that's been done in 6 key areas. The first one is really answering how water sensitive is your city. This was really starting to take the research and embed it into some diagnostic frameworks that enable a city or a region to understand where it's at in its current state in relation to 7 goals and 32 indicators, I believe, of a water sensitive city. We've developed some economic tools, the absolute importance of being able to understand the economic value, the business case, if you like, of a investment into a water sensitive future. We've looked closely at harmonising better the land use planning and water planning that occurs at various levels of government to get greater synergy and benefit from planning done at regional scales. We've looked at the infill context of urban growth, which we know is significant in all cities across Australia and internationally, and explored new built form typologies that would produce improved outcomes in respect of water management, urban heat management, livability, and develop frameworks that enable those alternate designs to be evaluated and demonstrated in terms of overall performance. We've looked at some specifics around developing in high groundwater areas, and our partners in Western Australia deal with shallow groundwater tables, and that was a specific area of research interest for them. And finally, we had a specific program which was all about synthesizing the research into a portfolio or a suite of tools and guidelines and frameworks that is what I'll be presenting for you today. So that's a little bit about the CRC. So the main presentation is really about presenting a suite of what we're calling our flagship tools and products. So I'll step right into that. They're all about addressing key challenges, and the key challenges facing most cities in Australia and indeed internationally centre around ongoing population growth, urban intensification, loss of green space, future impacts of climate change and challenging economic conditions. What we can see as we intensify development and we lose green space and we layer on top of that the impacts of climate change, we have a changing urban environment which impacts on our prosperity and livability and resilience, which manifests in various ways. The map on the right showing the heat signature, if you like, of an intensifying, densifying city, where you can see the green spaces retain their cool signature, whereas the roads, the built form, is building heat into the cities. And as we know in Sydney, and particularly Western Sydney, this has become a very prevalent issue in policy and planning. So in response to that, community and policymakers are asking for higher level outcomes. They want livability, resilience, sustainability and productivity as an outcome of the growth and development of our cities. And it's in this area that the CRC has focused its efforts and research. So a water sensitive city looks quite different to how we have traditionally developed cities and the way we've embedded infrastructure to serve cities. It's spatially aligned differently. It contains much more open space, green space, much more retention of water at surface in the landscape, smarter buildings using smarter technology to preserve the resource at source and be able to reuse it effectively under small circular systems. So it's effectively a transition from a traditional linear approach to development and water servicing in particular to a more circular one. With the benefits being more comfortable, livable cities as distinct to hotter, less hospitable cities. So the tools and products that the CRC's developed to help us transition to that more favourable water sensitive cities future are going to be presented now. And I'm going to present them in a classic planning continuum, if you like, from vision and strategy development as an initial exercise through to planning and assessment related activities, integrated planning and scenario testing different built forms and different infrastructure solutions and testing those through economic frameworks, down to more detailed design and implementation level support tools, the type of alternate infill development typologies that you might consider in the developing middle ring and the evaluation frameworks that support those, and some tools that help make rapid and smart decisions around investments to protect the natural capital and ecosystems of our urban areas. So what you see on the screen there is, I guess, the suite of flagship tools that the CRC has produced. Each one of those can be used individually for a particular part of the planning process, but ideally they get used as an integrated suite through a complete planning process. So I'll start with the vision and strategy related tools, and we have two key tools as part of that suite. We have our Water Sensitive Cities Index, and we have what's known as the Transition Dynamics Framework. And I'll explain each of those in the following slides. So in respect of planning a transition to a water sensitive city, the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities has developed a 5-module process which takes participants through a series of deliberative workshops to benchmark the current condition of their city or their municipality, to set a shared vision with stakeholders, and to develop strategies and actions. And the benefit of bringing a diverse range of stakeholders together through this process is to share knowledge and opportunities across sectors and between people who might not normally work together. So the great power in this process is its collaborative and deliberative process. As an important step in that process, that 5-step process, is undertaking this diagnostic benchmarking of where your city or your municipality is currently at. And that's using our Water Sensitive Cities Index. So the Water Sensitive Cities Index tool is a web-based tool, and it helps a city to get started on their water sensitive cities transition planning process. The tool supports stakeholders to work together to benchmark a city's current water sensitive city performance, and it uses 7 goals to define a water sensitive city and 36 individual indicators within those goals. The benchmarking is based on local knowledge and agreement across many stakeholders through a 1-day facilitated workshop where the CRC has accredited a range of providers, we call them index providers, who facilitate and run those workshops. So once you've worked out how your city or your municipality is performing using the index and where you want to be in relation to your future aspirations through a vision, the next step is to understand and define what needs to be done to get there. And module 3 of the 5-step transition process uses what we call the transition dynamics framework. And this framework helps to determine the strategies and actions that will support a city's water sensitive cities transition. And the framework helps users prioritise areas for strategic action in order to establish the enabling environment for transitions to occur. These include people and champions, platforms for connecting these champions, science and knowledge, demonstration projects, and tools and instruments such as policy and regulation. An assessment of where your city currently sits across these areas helps to guide the development of strategies and action plans as shown in the slide above, where the traffic lighting helps identify where there's strengths, weaknesses in that overall environment and enabling environment. And the real value of this framework is it ensures that you don't just focus on 1 or 2 areas within this framework and leave other really important enabling areas unattended, with the research identifying that often if that's the case, you won't actually get a strong long-term commitment to your transition to a water-sensitive city. So just a little example, the Water Sensitive City Index process and the Transition Dynamics framework was recently applied with Hornsby Shire Council, and they have their draft Water Sensitive Hornsby strategy, which is out for public comment at the moment and is accessible via their website. And that document, I'd encourage you all to have a look at it. It's a great record, if you like, of how that indexing process and the Transition Dynamics Framework process has been done within Hornsby and the information captured as part of that. So you can get a sense as to what that process might look like if you were to undertake it in your own municipality. Other applications in New South Wales have included for Water New South Wales, municipalities including Blue Mountains, Goulburn, and 2 or 3 others. So you've seen the Water Sensitive Cities Index and the Transition Dynamics Framework. They're really important tools to help a city position itself to start to now really implement actions and deliver on-ground outcomes in relation to the journey towards a water-sensitive future. The next suite of tools are then related to how to start to reflect that vision and aspiration in the decisions that are made in terms of local planning and the optioneering, if you like, around different built form and infrastructure solutions that are going to be able to deliver those livability, sustainability and prosperity outcomes. There's 3 areas of guidance and tools that the CRC's created. One of those is around informing and providing guidance as to how to undertake improved integrated planning, and in particular the integration of water planning and land use planning in that context. We have the Water Sensitive Cities Scenario Tool, which is a web-based tool that enables very rapid multi-stakeholder gaming or testing of different built form and blue-green infrastructure solutions for a particular location. And we have what's known as the Investment Framework for Economics of Water Sensitive Cities. Quite a mouthful. The acronym is also quite a mouthful in FUSE, but it's effectively a benefit cost analysis tool supported by a very rigorous values tool that quantifies non-market values so that they can be confidently included in a cost benefit analysis. So I'll just quickly run through what's being provided under each of those. So in terms of the integrated planning framework, this is still a work in progress for the CRC, and the guidance material will be coming out shortly. Effectively, the guidance material will be there to assist water sensitive development in different contexts, and will be developed to include a conceptual framework and some collaborative processes and methods, and strategic guidance on policy planning and governance arrangements. And there'll be some case studies that will demonstrate how some of that advice has been reflected at different scales and different urban contexts. So this information is not quite in the public domain yet, but will be arriving in the next few months. In terms of the Water Sensitive Cities Scenario Tool, this is a web-based tool and it's effectively enables users, and by users, the intent here is this is a tool that gets used as sort of a high-level planning and rapid assessment tool where you can get multi-stakeholders around the table to game and test the performance of different possible futures. Excuse me. It enables you to project different future development scenarios, including different densities, different configurations of street block layouts, and proportions of open space to impervious areas, and where you locate green infrastructure, trees, and parklands and the like. And from that information and some climatic information that's built into the model, it assesses a couple of performance indicators around urban heat and the urban water cycle. So it's a very useful tool to support early strategic land use planning. And so, as I mentioned, it will look at different urban development forms, so greenfield and infill, and enables you to define within that different typologies through the parameters that are entered into the model. And it enables you to define where you're placing blue and green infrastructure in the context of that urban layout. So on the screen there, you can kind of see an existing sort of traditional urban layout and a business as usual application of green infrastructure into that footprint, which would typically be some street trees. And on the right-hand side is an alternate configuration that's looking at a much more extensive level of green infrastructure intervention into that footprint, as an example. So being a web-based tool, it's very graphical, uses a lot of map imagery and produces a lot of maps that can be exported out into council GIS systems for further analysis and post-processing. In this instance, you can see here the massed up built form of a particular area that you might want to assess and analyse. Depending on how you inform the model in terms of the application of blue-green infrastructure into that footprint, the model will then assess that and provide information, both in terms of maps and statistics that give you some indicators around land surface temperature in this instance, air temperature, and human thermal comfort. Similarly, in that same analysis area, it will do an assessment of the the urban water mass balance. And again, you can look at this at different scales, down to an individual lot, to a neighbourhood, or up to a large precinct or suburb, or even greater, a whole city if you'd like. And what this does is it basically maps the stocks and flows, if you like, of water into and out of that particular area of interest based on a particular integrated water cycle strategy that you're wanting to test, which could be combinations of things like rainwater tanks on buildings, precinct stormwater harvesting, wastewater recycling, sewer mining and the like. You define that strategy in the model, and the model produces the mass balance outcome. So just a couple of little examples of some recent applications of the scenario tool. We've been doing a process with the City of Townsville in Queensland. And the typical process is to understand initially what the business as usual development trajectory for your area of interest is. So in this instance, in this example, we were looking at what business as usual development in Townsville would look like out to 2051. And the tool, because it is a geospatial tool, it actually provides a lot of really useful mapping outputs that can inform strategic planning decision making very early on. So not just heat and water cycle. And it's looking at overall what's happening in terms of increases or decreases in magnitudes of those against a series of indicators. So you can see on this slide, the tool will be able to tell you the percentage increase or decrease in tree cover, the potable water being supplied or used within the urban footprint, the overall percentage pervious, to what extent it's increasing or decreasing under different future scenarios, and how much population is changing. So generally start analysing a business as usual base case, and then here's just some examples, I guess, of some of the exported maps that come out of the scenario tool that can be imported into a council GIS system. So you can see here for Townsville as our example, this map here is just quickly showing, for the benefit of planners and other decision makers and city officials, how much is the impervious fraction of the city changing in response to future growth out over several years. Similarly, how much is tree cover changing and where? And how much is temperature or air temperature changing and where? And so this sort of spatial mapping is very powerful to help inform decisions around land use planning in particular, and it can inform where you might locate future density in relation to certain areas of heat and heat vulnerability risk, or other water cycle risks such as flooding and the like. So, beyond analysing your business as usual development base case as your comparison point, the tool then enables you to game and test a whole lot of different built form typologies and blue-green infrastructure typologies at different scales. And so these slides are just giving little rapid examples of looking at different scenarios at different scales, analysing the outputs from those in terms of land cover, water balance, heat, and in a process, I guess, of just kind of looking at how different scenarios work at different scales, and then aggregating those up to your municipal or city scale enables you to then get a picture as to whether you've got your planning and policy settings right, and whether you've got the guidelines that are directing how development occurs right. So a few more little examples, just of a very basic example of a small greenfield area. The model enables you to define down to individual lot levels, what the characteristics of a site is in terms of site cover, levels of imperviousness, where trees are placed and so on the site. It uses all that information to run its algorithms to generate its outputs of water balance and heat indicators. So you've got a sense there of what the scenario tool's all about. It's I think, a very novel and new tool in the market that enables, in particular, urban form, water cycle and urban heat outcomes to be rapidly evaluated at a sort of conceptual level. The Infuse tool, the Investment Framework for Economics of Water Sensitive Cities, is really about building the business case, the cost benefit of investments and using this as a mechanism to be able to then get confident investment into those solutions. So the Infuse tool, as you can see on the screen here, it helps you answer a couple of questions. Is my water sensitive project worthwhile? And what are the benefits and costs of my water sensitive project? And indeed, who bears or shares in those costs and benefits? It's a very traditional cost benefit analysis tool, but it's been tailored and nuanced to be very specific to or useful to be able to be rapidly used to assess water sensitive city type projects. So whilst it can be used for non-water sensitive city applications as a BCA tool, it's got a lot of inbuilt features that make it particularly efficient to be able to assess water sensitive city projects. So you can see on the bottom right hand side there, it comprises a BCA tool as an Excel spreadsheet, a value tool, which is a comprehensive Excel-based database of more than 2,000 non-market values that relate to water sensitive systems and practices, and it's supported by a range of guidelines and practice notes. So the BCA tool component, which as I mentioned is a spreadsheet, so it's very accessible. It effectively has three main sources of information that feed it. What are you doing, where and how? So locational actions that you define. What are the benefits accruing from those actions? So different types of benefits, and who is participating in financing and funding those particular actions, and looks at risks associated with those financing options, and it in the end produces a net present value benefit cost ratio report and undertakes some sensitivity analysis on some of the assumptions that support that. The value tool, which supports the benefits part of that process, as I mentioned, has more than 2,000 individual entries in it, which are categorised into 20 different benefit types, which include ecological improvement and biodiversity, reducing recurrent costs, the improved security of water supply, reduced morbidity and improved health from extreme heat, and improved aesthetics as a list there. And some of the features of Value Tool is it's a comprehensive list that's up to date and is related to water sensitive cities in Australia. The Values Tool uses filters and search functions that make it sort of very easy to narrow down on relevant benefit values that could be used for your particular analysis. It classifies benefit values in a range of ways to help identify which ones are relevant and provides supporting information in making those choices. Has all of the values listed in it with web links and citations to the original resources to which those values have been extracted from. And it indicates a level of robustness of the original study that those values have been taken from. So you've got all that information captured in that one single database, which is a significant value and new tool. And effectively what it does is it enables, again, in a sort of a multi-stakeholder deliberative process to very rapidly look at different water sensitive city project options and quickly identify the list of benefits that are going to accrue from those potential strategies or solutions, the costs associated, enables you to sort of graphically represent those in ways that make it very clear where the benefits are accruing and in what areas, and how the benefits relate to costs and whether you are in fact a feasible and viable investment. And that can be post-processed in various ways to communicate to investors or elected officials or to community and residents the value of individual projects. So, what's the total benefit value, the total cost value, the BCR, who receives the benefit, and who pays the cost. So a very useful tool, I guess, to make sure that beyond just having good ideas and good strategy and good planning, that you've got the the evidence-based information to be able to support confident investment into solutions on the ground. So the next phase of tools is really down at providing more specific advice and guidance and frameworks around solutions at local scales. And so the two tools that I'll just quickly talk to is the infill typologies and performance evaluation framework, and finally the restore tool. So the infill development for water sensitive urban design, there's two basic products that the CRC's developed. An infill typologies catalogue, which is a range of possibilities and ideas that have been conceived more from a sort of an architectural perspective around different ways to configure and lay out sites and to imagine the built form to effectively provide more pervious space within infill development areas, whilst maintaining and protecting the desire to achieve certain population densities, and to have those building typologies deliver a range of benefits in relation to water balance and heat mitigation and overall livability and aesthetics. So the infill typologies catalogue is a great resource for architects and urban designers and planners who might want to seek some inspiration from that information and adapt the thinking and ideas to your local context. And the infill performance evaluation framework is a framework that enables infill typologies to be evaluated in order to assess their performance against a series of key indicators, which I'll show on the next page. So you can just see on the right-hand side a couple of little images there that just talk to maybe an existing configuration on a site that's going to be redeveloped in a traditional business as usual way of infilling that area. You probably high imperviousness example in the middle, and a water sensitive infill typology variant on the right hand side. And the evaluation of those through the evaluation framework enables you to assess the performance. And you can see the sort of spider diagram on the left-hand side there as a series of indicators: dwelling amenity, outdoor private space, outdoor communal space, outdoor public space. So these are sort of a subjective value assessments, water efficiency, stormwater runoff, and urban heat outcomes. So these tools, I guess, enable you to, as a proponent, to look at alternatives and be able to put a strong kind of evidence-based business case to a local council or a regulator, or conversely, a municipality might want to use these tools to look at how you might adjust planning provisions and so on to achieve the kind of community aspirations and outcomes you want for your city in relation to water cycle and urban heat metrics. The final tool I will just touch on is called the Restore tool, and Restore is a tool to help make very rapid decisions on how best to invest in ecological management and recovery of urban streams and waterways. So the Restore tool is also a spreadsheet-based tool, and it effectively poses a series of questions to which a collection of local stakeholders knowledgeable about the local ecosystems and water environment can answer those questions rapidly based on local knowledge and tacit knowledge, rather than having to go and do extensive analytical work and modelling work. And as an outcome of the application of the tool, it's really geared towards creating a mechanism to get consensus quickly on where best to place your investment when it comes to restoring ecosystem services and values and functions within urban waterways. It looks at a whole series of different indicator areas, from hydrology, geomorphology, ecological connectivity, both longitudinally and laterally, riparian condition, the chemical water quality, nutrients, and the biota. And based on the knowledge and input from local experts, enables you to rate and prioritise where you should place your investment for a particular stream context. And again, uses little plots like spider diagram on the left-hand side there to communicate the outcomes of application of the tool to decision makers, investors, and the community. So supporting those those software tools, if you like, is a series of guidelines that have been developed by the CRC, and I've just listed not all of them here. And indeed, there's more than 2,000 pieces of IP that have been created by the CRC that are all accessible through the CRC's website. But a small snapshot here for the purpose of today, in terms of vision and planning level work, there's some good guidance for engaging communities in water-sensitive city transitions. In terms of that economic analysis, there's some good documentation of different applied examples and case studies of the application of the Infuse tool to different contexts and scales, and some guidance on how to construct a compelling business case for water-sensitive investments. Down more at the design and implementation level, there's specific technical guidelines in relation to green treatment technologies, biofilter systems, and there's guidance on designing for a cool city, so designing for passively irrigated landscapes and trees for a cool city, guidelines for optimised tree placement and the like. So as I say, this is not an exhaustive list, but access the CRC's website and you'll be able to sort of search your way through and find a whole plethora of useful guidance, practice notes for industry. So in summary, the CRC tools and guides help us deliver water-sensitive city outcomes by addressing key gaps and issues. So help to provide the evidence and frameworks required to move us away from business as usual. They support collaboration, so collaboration and communication across multiple stakeholders is key to most of the tools. They are mostly deliberative tools to be applied within multi-stakeholder forums. They're all underpinned by robust solutions and research. So years of research underpins the tools, which provides the confidence for users in their application. That's it from me. So thanks, Beth. I'll stop sharing my screen and hand it back to you, Beth.
Okay. So thank you very much, Malcolm. That was great. Next we have Nell, and I will try to find her in my list here and unmute her. Here she is. Oh, she's unmuted. Oh, but I can't hear. No, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
I can now. Good.
You can? Okay,
yeah.
Good. Look, Malcolm's really gone through and given a really thorough description of all the tools. And so I was just going to talk about how the CRC tools and guidelines, council area, framework, and how some of them have been used locally, but just touching on a few because we're running a bit short of time. So I just wanted to, they're kind of the discussion points I'm going to talk about, but I was going to also say that I am the chair of the New South Wales Regional Advisory Panel, and just quickly what these panels are about. So they were established to provide feedback on the research tools and guidelines that have been developed during their development, so that these tools and usable for all the partners who participated in the research on the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities program. So yeah, so I'm the current chair, but we are inviting more people across Sydney to come and join in the advisory committee in our last little push towards the end of the CRC next year. Just in a New South Wales planning context, The Sydney Greater Commission has developed a vision and plan for Sydney, which, you know, aspires to have people that live in a 30-minute city. So they're close to their work, school, shops, health facilities, services, and great green places to recreate. So it has as its core connected infrastructure, livability, productivity and sustainability. So aligns very well with the CRC for water sensitive cities. In this planning context now, we've all done our local strategic planning statements, and most of these will have some reference to waterway health and becoming water sensitive cities. Also, Malcolm touched on the urban water transition framework, and this, you may have seen this before, really shows, you know, firstly a water supply and going through the transition from sewered city to a water sensitive city. So the CRC for water sensitive cities and the research tools and guidelines have been designed to help to make this transition. So the urban water transition framework is part of that deliberative workshop and the shared visioning that Malcolm touched on. And it helps to benchmark kind of where you're at and identify strategies to transition to a water sensitive city. So all councils are at different stages in their journeys towards a water sensitive city. So these kind of tools and collaborative approaches really help to make that happen, especially when we're, you know, adapting to climate change. We're trying to build resilience against all the stresses and shocks from environmental disasters, economic downturns, and now this COVID pandemic. So it's really important that we continue this journey towards water sensitive cities. So as Malcolm also said, you know, the value to councils is that it's evidence-based. You know, we're always stretched for funding, and we need to make our dollar go further. We need to do it collaboratively, because working in silos doesn't work. We need an integrated, collaborative approach where we bring all our stakeholders together. And these tools really help us to do that. And the consultants that are trained in them are fantastic. So, you know, it's place-based and placemaking. The cost-benefit analysis tool really does help you make that business case. All the tools are scalable, so, you know, you could use them at a subcatchment level or a precinct level, a town, a city, or a region. So also the case studies are really excellent tools, because it shows you how they've been implemented, and it provides you with contact details too of people. So, you know, if there's not enough information there, you can always pick up the phone and ring someone who's done it before, and you can really get a good, you know, word of mouth advice. So I think the main message is that these tools are adaptive. So some for Sydney, some Sydney examples is that in the vision and strategy tools, in 2018, a vision and transition strategy for a water sensitive Greater Sydney was done. And it used that transition framework to benchmark where Sydney was at that time. Was also a really good deliberative workshop that brought a lot of people from high, you know, levels of state and local government together, and industry as well, together to do this. And so I guess that little target there shows where we landed. What Canterbury, for the planning and assessment tool, the research synthesis project was run for the Campsie precinct because of the Sydenham to Bankstown rail corridor. So it's been identified as a precinct that is up for urban renewal. And so, you know, it brought a whole lot of stakeholders together from council, from utilities and state government to look at how that could be done differently in a water sensitive way. And that research synthesis then was fed back into council and into planning documents. I just want to say that the guidelines for implementation and maintenance are also, they're awesome. It also can bring people together to train together, to learn about, you know, maintenance issues. The Restore tool is, again, a fabulous tool. So it really turns that high level stuff into practical, on the ground tools or guidelines and reference documents that you can use as a resource. And also, I've already mentioned case studies, but that's they're always a really good tool as well. So look, I'm going to pass on and stop sharing because we're going to hear from Emma. And so thanks everyone.
Great, thanks, Nell.
I know I did a bit of potted quick talk rather than.
That's okay, all good. All right, Emma, you've unmuted yourself, excellent. And you know how to share your screen? I can't hear you.
Oh, no.
Oh, now I can.
How is that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, great. So hi everyone, my name's Emma Brunton and I'm Deputy Chair of the CRC Regional Advisory Panel in New South Wales. I work in the Water Utilities branch in the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, where we regulate, support and fund the 92 local water utilities across regional New South Wales. Nell has discussed the application of the CRC tools, guidelines and case studies in the metropolitan context, and I'll briefly talk to this in the regional New South Wales context. So for the regions, we should really adjust the wording water sensitive cities to water sensitive urban areas or water sensitive towns, noting that the CRC tools are scalable to all sizes of communities that people live in. And whether these are regional cities such as Tweed Heads, Dubbo Orange, towns such as Moama, Parks, Goulburn, or more remote areas with small villages and populations. So I note that 1/3 of New South Wales population lives in our regions, and the regions are growing and they're under pressure to plan for a water sensitive future amidst drying inland climates, an ever-increasing need to share scarce water resources fairly amongst towns, agriculture and the environment to support regional economies and communities. The CRC tools therefore are equally relevant and applicable as regional communities aspire to livable, resilient, sustainable and productive outcomes. So innovation is perhaps more achievable in regional New South Wales than in metro areas because the institutional and governance arrangements are themselves more integrated by nature. Councils are responsible for land use planning, and in the majority of places, council-owned and operated water utilities are responsible for delivering water and sewage services. Stormwater delivery is still fragmented though because local water utilities are financially ring-fenced from councils and managed separately from general council operations. So that means that local water utilities manage stormwater as a supply source and the council manages stormwater in terms of waterway management, water quality and flood control. That's similar to metro areas. The process of applying the CRC vision and strategy tools in itself guides councils and water utilities through an integration exercise that considers the whole of the water cycle and all of its ecosystem functions.
Emma, sorry
Yeah?
to interrupt, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry everyone.
Try again.
Okay, I'm going to, how was that?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, great. And can you see the full screen?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, now. Yep.
Yep. Okay, so just some context around planning in the regions. This follows the integrated planning and reporting framework set by local government for all councils across the state. Local water utilities are tasked with preparing integrated water cycle management strategies. These are 30-year water resourcing strategies, and they're supported by total asset management plans, financial plans, and drought plans. And this picture to the right just shows the water planning context in regional New South Wales. So currently there are 8 IWCMs formally in place across the 92 local water utilities, and 59 have applied for state government funding support to prepare those. So there's a large tranche of effort underway that can be usefully assisted by drawing on CRC tools, guidelines, and case studies to drive water sensitive outcomes for regional communities. Joint organisations can also apply for funding to prepare regional town water strategies that take a catchment-based planning approach. So just to recap, the CRC tools cover the functions across the water sensitive city transition framework that Malcolm and Nell outlined, and they provide a means to plan blue, green and other infrastructure in an integrated way and develop business cases that take into account the multiple benefits of water in the landscape. We note, there's varying capacity across the regions, and all councils are at different stages in the development of their place-based planning and water-sensitive town transitions. So all of the CRC products, the tools, case studies, guidelines produced by the CRC can assist with ongoing support to progress along this transition more effectively and benchmark along that journey. So there's some great examples out there in the regions. The CRC has worked with Orange, Dubbo and Goulburn. There's case studies available on Orange and Dubbo, but there's definitely lots of opportunity for more. I know, there's recycling is getting increasing attention in the regions. There's increasing uptake of smart meters in Dubbo, Central Darling, Golden Fields. So we'd love to hear from councils about the work they are doing in this space, as we want to showcase work for the CRC's upcoming national conference in March next year. So what's next? So please attend these webinar series. You can contact us. So Beth, you might be speaking to this, but yeah, please contact Beth and Nell and myself. Check out the websites. There's so many resources available on those. And yeah, I'll now hand back to Beth to give an overview of the upcoming webinars. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Emma. Can you stop sharing your screen, please?
There we go.
I'll go back to sharing mine. So as I think most of you are aware, this is going to be a series of webinars. There's 5 altogether, including today's. Today's was very much an overview of kind of the CRC and more of an introduction for people who haven't really been involved in the CRC up until now. So hopefully for those people who hadn't really done a lot with the CRC have a better understanding of what the CRC has been up to and how some of the tools and guidelines can help achieve what you're trying to do at your council. And for those of you who have been involved in the CRC for a little while, as I said, this was probably a little bit boring for you because you know all this stuff already. But the next 4 webinars are all based around a specific tool or guideline. And then we're going to have case studies as well. So as you can see on the slide, it's every Tuesday at 12:30. And from now until the 15th of December, which is the last one. So the first 2 are going to be around the Water Sensitivities Index and Transition Dynamics Framework. So the first one, we have someone again from the CRC speaking for about 20 minutes, and we have 2 case studies. Since it's, you know, quite a big tool and it's been around for a little while, there's a lot more examples. So I thought we'd take advantage of that. And the one on the 1st of December is only case studies. So hopefully we'll have about 4 case studies throughout New South Wales, regional as well as metro examples. And then on the 8th of December, we have some presentations around the street tree guidelines. And then the last one before Christmas will be the Infuse tool, which is the, if you remember from Malcolm's presentation, which is the benefit cost analysis tool. So yeah, if you have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to email me.